I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Your brain is already beginning to release the weight of today, sorting, softening, preparing to let go of what no longer needs to be held. You'll discover the quiet science of how your mind heals itself each night, and understand why letting go is not giving up. It is the most intelligent thing your brain knows how to do. Welcome to Sleepy Science Facts. Wherever you are, right now, perhaps feeling the familiar weight of the day still resting in your chest, or noticing thoughts that haven't quite released their grip yet, allow yourself this particular kind of stillness. We'll journey through 100 psychology facts about letting go. From the neural pathways that dissolve stress while you sleep, to the quiet chemistry of release, to the ancient intelligence inside you that knows, even now, exactly how to heal. This thoughtful journey through the neuroscience of release builds quiet bridges between exhausted minds searching for rest. A gentle subscribe, like, or sharing your thoughts creates a pathway for more sleepless souls to discover this space, and brings us closer to protecting this sanctuary for every tired mind that finds its way here. One peaceful night, one sleepy soul at a time. Your healing journey inspires ours. Let yourself settle completely here. Feel your jaw unclench, your breath deepen naturally. You can let these thoughts drift past without holding them. Sense that soothing heaviness enveloping you, like your consciousness slowly dimming its brightness. Thoughts dissolving into the peaceful fog of approaching sleep, safe and undisturbed. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You're floating where memories rest safely in gentle darkness. Let your mind merge with infinite peace. And now we begin. Your brain never truly holds on by choice. Every thought, every emotion, every memory you experience is the result of electrochemical signals passing between neurons. And those signals, by their very nature, are temporary. Neuroscientists have confirmed that the brain is not a storage unit that simply accumulates experience. It is a dynamic, constantly reorganizing system, pruning what it no longer needs, strengthening what matters, and releasing what has served its purpose. What we call holding on is actually the brain repeating a signal unnecessarily, like a song stuck on loop. And what we call letting go is simply the brain returning to its natural, fluid state. Tonight, your brain is already moving in that direction. The human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons. Each can form thousands of connections with others, producing an estimated network of hundreds of trillions of synaptic links, a scale of complexity that no technology has yet come close to mapping in full. Yet most of what you experience today will not be permanently stored. Research consistently shows that the brain discards the vast majority of sensory input within seconds of receiving it. Only a fraction, the emotionally relevant, the repeatedly experienced, the deeply meaningful, gets consolidated into long-term memory. Forgetting, it turns out, is not a failure of the brain. It is one of its most essential functions. The process of letting go begins with a structure deep in your brain called the prefrontal cortex, the region behind your forehead responsible for reasoning, planning, and emotional regulation. Studies using functional MRI imaging have shown that when people consciously choose to release a distressing thought or memory, the prefrontal cortex gently quiets activity in the hippocampus, the brain's primary memory retrieval center. This means that letting go is not passive. It is an active, measurable neurological event. Your brain making a deliberate choice about what deserves continued attention. There is a neurotransmitter called gamma-aminobutyric acid, commonly known as GABA, that acts as the brain's natural calming agent. GABA works by reducing neuronal excitability throughout the nervous system. When your body prepares for sleep, GABA levels rise significantly, quieting the circuits that keep you alert, anxious, and mentally active. Researchers at the NIH have described this shift as the brain essentially lowering the volume on the world. The sensation of heaviness you feel as you drift towards sleep is, in part, GABA doing exactly what it was designed to do, gently releasing your grip on wakefulness. Stress leaves a measurable chemical footprint in the brain. The hormone cortisol, released during periods of perceived threat or high demand, binds to receptors throughout the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, your brain's emotional alarm center. Elevated cortisol makes it biologically harder to let go of worrying thoughts. It keeps certain neural circuits on high alert. But here is what the research also shows. Sleep is one of the most powerful cortisol-clearing mechanisms the brain possesses. A full night of rest can reduce baseline cortisol levels substantially, quieting the very circuitry that keeps you caught in cycles of worry. The amygdala, too small, almond-shaped clusters of neurons nestled deep within the temporal lobes, plays a central role in why some experiences feel difficult to release. When the amygdala perceives something as emotionally significant, it signals the brain to encode that experience more deeply. This is why painful memories often feel more vivid and persistent than neutral ones. But research has also shown that during sleep, particularly during REM sleep, the amygdala undergoes a remarkable transformation. Its activity decreases, and the emotional charge attached to difficult memories begins, slowly, to soften. REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, was once thought to be simply the stage of vivid dreaming. We now understand it as something far more profound. During REM, the brain replays the emotional content of recent experiences, but does so in a neurochemical environment that is quieter, softer, and stripped of the stress hormone norepinephrine. Think of it as reviewing a difficult chapter of your life from a safe distance, with the alarm turned off. This process, studied extensively at UC Berkeley and other sleep research centers, appears to be how the brain processes painful or overwhelming experiences, not by erasing them, but by gently detaching their emotional sting while you sleep. The scientific term for this process is emotional memory reconsolidation. Each time a memory is retrieved, whether during waking life or during sleep, it becomes temporarily unstable and open to modification before being stored again. Sleep provides a window during which the brain can revisit charged memories and restore them with reduced emotional intensity. This is not the same as forgetting. The facts of what happened remain intact. What changes is the weight of feeling attached to them. Research, published in leading neuroscience journals, suggests that this reconsolidation process is most active in the hours between 3 and 6 in the morning. Chronic sleep deprivation has a well-documented effect on the brain's ability to let go of negative experiences. Studies comparing well-rested individuals to those who had been awake for 35 hours found that the sleep-deprived group showed up to 60% greater amygdala reactivity, responding with far greater intensity to emotionally negative images, and holding on to distress far longer. Sleep is not a luxury that allows letting go. For the human brain, sleep is the mechanism through which letting go becomes neurologically possible. There is a network of brain regions called the default mode network, active when the mind is not focused on any external task. You know this state. It is the quiet wandering your thoughts do when you are resting, daydreaming, or drifting just before sleep. For a long time, the default mode network was thought to be simply background noise, the brain idling. More recent research has overturned this completely. The default mode network appears to be deeply involved in self-referential thinking, narrative processing, and the integration of past experiences into a coherent sense of self. When you let your mind wander softly at night, you are not wasting time. You are doing some of the most meaningful psychological work available to you. One of the most significant discoveries in sleep science over the past decade involves a system called the glymphatic system. First described in detail around 2013 and still an active area of research. The glymphatic system is a network of channels surrounding the brain's blood vessels that appears to flush metabolic waste from brain tissue during sleep. Animal studies have shown particularly strong glymphatic activity during sleep, with the spaces between brain cells expanding by up to 60%, allowing cerebrospinal fluid to flow more freely. Early human imaging data suggests similar processes occur, though the full extent of glymphatic activity in people remains an evolving area of science. What is already clear is that the sleeping brain is engaged in active clearing, and that clearing is not only physical, it is the brain's most literal act of letting go each night, releasing what accumulated during the day so the mind can begin tomorrow unencumbered. Among the waste products the glymphatic system appears to clear during sleep are proteins associated with neurodegenerative conditions, including beta amyloid and tau proteins linked to Alzheimer's disease. Studies in both animal models and early human research suggest that disrupted sleep may reduce this clearance, though the full causal picture in humans is still being carefully mapped. What this finding quietly points toward is something deeper. The brain's capacity to release emotional residue the following day may depend, in part, on whether it was given the conditions to clear its physical residue the night before. Rest and release are, at every level, the same process. Electroencephalography, the measurement of electrical activity in the brain, reveals a rich landscape of activity across the sleeping hours. The sleeping brain cycles through distinct stages approximately every 90 minutes. Each cycle includes light sleep, deep slow-wave sleep, and REM sleep, and each stage serves a different dimension of release. Deep slow-wave sleep handles the physical clearing, consolidating memories, rebalancing hormones, restoring tissue. REM sleep handles the emotional dimension, processing difficult experiences, softening their charge, preparing the mind to face tomorrow with greater ease. The brain is not dormant at night. It is organizing everything you could not release during the day. The chemistry of letting go is, in part, the chemistry of a molecule called serotonin, often described as a mood stabilizer. Serotonin also plays a key role in regulating the transitions between wakefulness and sleep. It is a precursor to melatonin, the hormone that signals darkness and initiates the sleep process. But serotonin also modulates activity in the amygdala, reducing its reactivity and allowing the emotional brain to move out of high alert mode. When you feel that particular kind of softness settling over you at night, that sense of things becoming less urgent, serotonin is part of that quiet chemistry. Research into the neuroscience of rumination, the tendency to repeatedly replay upsetting thoughts or situations, has revealed something counterintuitive. The more cognitive effort a person applies to stopping an unwanted thought, the more that thought tends to persist. This is known as the ironic rebound effect, and it was first systematically studied by the psychologist Daniel Wegner in the late 1980s. More recent neuroimaging studies have confirmed the mechanism. Suppressing a thought activates the prefrontal cortex, and paradoxically keeps the suppressed thought in a kind of working memory. The brain that fights its thoughts holds them longer. The brain that allows them to pass releases them more readily. The science of psychological acceptance, choosing to acknowledge difficult thoughts and feelings without trying to control or eliminate them, has accumulated substantial research support over the past 2 decades. Studies using both self-report measures and neuroimaging have found that acceptance-based approaches reduce activity in the amygdala more reliably than suppression-based approaches. When a person shifts from fighting a thought to simply noticing it without judgment, the prefrontal cortex changes its relationship to the limbic system, moving from conflict to quiet observation. Letting go, the research suggests, begins not with effort but with permission. There is a structure in the brainstem called the locus coeruleus, a small cluster of neurons that produces the vast majority of the brain's norepinephrine, a neurotransmitter associated with alertness, arousal, and the stress response. During REM sleep, the locus coeruleus goes almost completely quiet. This neurochemical silence is thought to be one of the reasons that emotionally processing difficult material during sleep carries less psychological weight than processing it while awake. The brain's alarm system is temporarily suspended. You revisit, you integrate, but you do so from a place of biological safety. Memory consolidation during sleep is not a passive recording process. It is selective, active, and deeply influenced by emotional weight and personal relevance. A series of studies using word learning tasks found that the sleeping brain preferentially strengthens memories that participants had been told were meaningful, even when those memories had been no more thoroughly encoded at the time of learning. The brain, it appears, has a sense of priority. It decides what is worth keeping. And every night, without your conscious involvement, it is making those decisions on your behalf. The hippocampus, the seahorse-shaped region of the brain central to memory formation, undergoes a transfer process during deep sleep. Memories initially encoded in the hippocampus are gradually moved to the neocortex for longer-term storage. This process, called systems consolidation, is thought to free up the hippocampus each night, so it is ready to receive new experiences the following day. Without this nightly clearing, the hippocampus would become overwhelmed. The brain literally empties one container each night, so there is room to fill it again tomorrow. This is letting go in its most structural, most necessary form. One of the more elegant aspects of the sleeping brain is its capacity to find patterns across seemingly unrelated experiences. Studies have found that people are measurably better at solving certain insight problems, particularly those requiring the recognition of hidden patterns or unexpected connections, after a night of sleep compared to an equal period of wakefulness. During sleep, the brain loosens its associative boundaries, allowing remote connections to form that alert goal-directed thinking would normally suppress. The relaxed brain is, in a real sense, a more creative brain and a more forgiving one. The body's physical response to the act of letting go is measurable and immediate. When a person consciously releases mental tension through slow breathing, relaxing musculature, or simply allowing thoughts to pass, the autonomic nervous system shifts from sympathetic dominance to parasympathetic dominance. Heart rate slows, blood pressure drops, digestion resumes its normal rhythm, peripheral blood vessels dilate. These changes are not metaphorical. They are the physiological signature of safety. Your body's ancient intelligence recognizing that the threat, whatever it was, no longer requires a response. The vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the body, running from the brainstem down through the neck, chest, and abdomen, is the primary highway of the parasympathetic nervous system. When activated, it slows the heart, relaxes the airways, and signals the brain that the body is safe. Recent research has confirmed that vagal activity increases significantly during the transition into sleep, and that individuals with greater resting vagal tone tend to show more emotional flexibility, a greater capacity for recovering from distress and, by extension, for releasing what has upset them. The sensation of the body growing heavy as you approach sleep. That pleasant, weighted feeling that seems to press you gently into the mattress is not simply a metaphor. It is the result of a genuine shift in muscle tone, driven in part by the accumulation of adenosine in the brainstem. Adenosine is a byproduct of cellular activity that builds throughout the day. As its concentration rise, it progressively quiets the arousal circuits of the brain. Sleep, in part, is the body's way of clearing adenosine, and the heaviness you feel is the sensation of that quieting, deepening. You are, quite literally, being gently let go by your own biology. New research in affective neuroscience, the study of how the brain generates emotions, has identified a network of regions involved in emotional downregulation, the gradual and natural softening of emotional intensity. This network includes the prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, and the insula. Studies have found that people who sleep longer and more deeply show measurably better emotional downregulation the following day, reacting with less intensity to frustrating or upsetting events, and recovering more gently when they do react. A single good night of sleep increases your capacity to let go of what disturbs you tomorrow. There is a quality in sleep science referred to as sleep continuity, the degree to which a person's sleep remains uninterrupted through the night. Research has found that sleep continuity, not simply total sleep duration, predicts next-day emotional resilience. Even brief awakenings during REM sleep, too short to be consciously remembered, can disrupt the emotional processing work the sleeping brain is doing. This means that the environment in which you sleep matters as much as the amount you sleep. Quiet, darkness, warmth, and safety are not merely comforts. For the healing, releasing brain, they are conditions. Let's pause here and notice your body. As you breathe out slowly, appreciate each tiny cell inside. Right now, your brain is sorting today, deciding what matters, what can be released. You don't need to do anything. It knows how. Trillions of processes working in silence. Heart beating, lungs breathing, brain thinking, all without your command. Notice the gentle sensations on your skin, in your muscles, along your spine. You are a complete ecosystem, diverse, self-balancing. Now we continue. The relationship between sleep and emotional memory is not simply about what the brain removes. It is equally about what it preserves. Studies tracking memory consolidation over sleep have found that the sleeping brain tends to retain the emotional gist of an experience, the meaning, the feeling, the lesson, while gradually reducing the sharpness of the most distressing sensory details. This is the brain performing a kind of quiet editing, not erasing your story, but softening the edges of its most difficult passages so that you can carry it forward without being overwhelmed by it. Theta brainwaves, oscillations measuring between 4 and 8 cycles per second, appear most prominently during the early stages of sleep and during states of deep relaxation. Theta activity is associated with the consolidation of emotional memories, creativity, and what researchers describe as integrative processing, the brain's capacity to weave together disparate experiences into coherent meaning. This is why the drowsy, half-asleep state that many people experience before fully drifting off is often accompanied by unusual, creative, or unexpectedly meaningful thoughts. The threshold between wakefulness and sleep is, neurologically, a deeply productive place for letting go to begin. One of the quieter findings in recent sleep research concerns the role of sleep spindles, brief bursts of synchronized neural activity that appear during the second stage of non-REM sleep. Sleep spindles are now understood to play a role in protecting sleep continuity, but also in transferring information from the hippocampus to the neocortex. Research published within the past several years has further linked sleep spindle density to next-day emotional stability, suggesting that the deeper and more structured your sleep, the more effectively your brain moves emotional material from the raw, unprocessed state towards something quieter and more integrated. The brain's capacity for letting go is not uniform across people. Research on individual differences in sleep and emotional processing has found that people vary considerably in what scientists call emotional inertia, the degree to which an emotional state persists beyond its triggering event. Those who experience high emotional inertia tend to sleep less efficiently, show fewer sleep spindles, and report greater difficulty moving past upsetting experiences. This is not a moral failing or a weakness of character. It is a neurobiological pattern, one that can shift gently and over time, with the simple, repeated act of giving the brain the quiet it needs to do its work. The two-process model of sleep regulation, first proposed by Alexander Borbély and still the dominant framework in sleep science today, describes sleep as governed by two converging pressures. Process S, the accumulating homeostatic need for sleep that builds with every waking hour, and Process C, the circadian rhythm that determines the timing of alertness and drowsiness across the 24-hour day. When both processes align, when your sleep pressure is high and your circadian rhythm is calling for rest, sleep arrives most easily and most completely. Right now, both processes are likely converging. Your brain and body are working together, quietly, to carry you toward the release that sleep allows. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, continues throughout life, and sleep is one of its most important conditions. During sleep, many researchers believe the brain undergoes something called synaptic homeostasis, a gradual scaling down of synaptic strength across much of the neural network. This influential hypothesis, proposed by Giulio Tononi and Chiara Cirelli, suggests that sleep prevents the brain from becoming overwhelmed by the accumulation of new connections formed during waking learning. Sleep, in this view, makes room for new growth by gently releasing what has become rigid or redundant, allowing tomorrow's learning to begin in a landscape that has been quietly prepared. Dreams, for all their strangeness, appear to serve a measurable psychological function. A study published in the journal Current Biology found that people who dreamed about a distressing experience were less disturbed by it when tested the following day, compared to those who did not dream about it. The researchers proposed that dreaming allows the brain to process emotionally significant material in a context separated from the neurochemical conditions that originally generated the distress. The dream is not a replay. It is a rehearsal of letting go, the brain practicing release while you sleep. The phenomenon of sleep-dependent forgetting, the selective softening of certain memories during sleep, was once considered a side effect of the consolidation process. More recent research suggests it may be its own active mechanism. Studies using targeted memory reactivation, where sounds associated with specific memories are played softly during sleep, have shown that the brain can be guided to selectively strengthen certain memories during sleep. More recent work suggests the reverse may also be possible, that some memory traces can be gradually quieted through similar methods, though this remains an emerging area of science. The sleeping brain, it appears, is not simply filing information. It is actively tending what belongs to tomorrow. One of the clearest demonstrations of the brain's healing capacity during sleep comes from research on how people respond to overwhelming experiences. Studies of individuals following difficult events have found that those who sleep well in the days immediately following show significantly reduced rates of lasting psychological distress. The early, undisturbed nights of sleep appear to allow the brain to begin processing and contextualizing what happened, not eliminating the memory, but gently beginning to place it in a frame that can eventually be carried with greater ease. Sleep, in the aftermath of difficulty. offers a kind of biological support that nothing else quite replicates. The default mode network. That collection of brain regions active during wakeful rest and mind-wandering shows a characteristic shift in activity during sleep. In particular, the medial prefrontal cortex, a key component associated with self-referential thinking, becomes less dominant during deep sleep. This is the part of the brain most active during worry, self-judgment, and the rehearsal of social concerns. Its quieting during deep sleep is not incidental. It represents a genuine neurological release from the continuous work of self-monitoring, a rest from the exhausting project of constructing and maintaining a self. The body's inflammatory response, the broad biochemical system that responds to injury, infection, and psychological stress, is directly modulated by sleep. Research has consistently found that sleep deprivation elevates markers of systemic inflammation, including interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein. Conversely, restorative sleep reduces these markers. Chronic stress, unprocessed emotion, and suppressed grief have all been linked to elevated inflammatory states in the body. This means that releasing rather than suppressing, truly allowing rather than holding on, has measurable effects at the cellular level. The healing trend is not only psychological, it runs all the way down. The insula, a folded region of the cortex buried within the lateral sulcus, is involved in interoception, the brain's awareness of the body's internal state. Heartbeat, breath, temperature, hunger, the subtle physical quality of emotions, all are processed through the insula. Recent research has found that the insula plays a key role in the experience of emotional release. When people describe the physical sensation of letting something go, the loosening in the chest, the releasing of breath, the insula is centrally involved. The brain doesn't just think about letting go. Through the insula, it feels it. There is a fascinating body of research on what scientists call affect labeling, the simple act of putting a feeling into words. Studies using functional MR have shown that naming an emotion, saying or thinking, "I feel sad" or "I feel anxious," measurably reduces activity in the amygdala and increases activity in the prefrontal cortex. This is one of the neurological mechanisms behind the value of speaking about difficulties, or simply naming what you are feeling as you lie in the dark before sleep. Language gives the emotional brain a shape, and a shape can be set down. Oxytocin, often described as the bonding hormone, also plays a role in the neuroscience of letting go. Research has found that oxytocin reduces activity in the amygdala and strengthens the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, improving the brain's capacity for emotional regulation. Oxytocin is released during warmth, physical contact, feelings of safety, and the quiet sense of being held. The conditions that encourage its release: a warm bed, a soft voice, the simple trust that things are, for this moment, safe, are also the conditions most conducive to rest and release. One of the quietest and most consistent findings in psychological research is that the subjective experience of time changes during emotional processing. Difficult emotions, when held and resisted, tend to feel endless. the same emotional content, when accepted and allowed to move through, passes more gently. Neuroscientists have proposed that this reflects a genuine difference in how the brain encodes temporal information during high arousal versus low arousal states. In practical terms, it means that the ease you are looking for may be much closer than it feels. The brain that stops fighting the wave often finds the shore sooner than expected. You're still here with me. Thoughts still flickering like candlelight. Just notice. Don't judge. Just notice where your mind is. We're exploring consciousness itself, the very thing doing the exploring right now. Strange, beautiful, and perfectly calm. Let's drift onward together. The neurological process of letting go is intimately connected to what psychologists call psychological flexibility, the capacity to be present with one's experience, even when that experience is uncomfortable, without being controlled by the need to change it. Research has found that psychological flexibility predicts better mental health outcomes, lower rates of anxiety, and greater emotional resilience across the lifespan. Neuroimaging studies suggest it correlates with stronger functional connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex. The more flexible the mind, the more readily the brain moves through difficulty rather than becoming fixed within it. And the more naturally letting go becomes the brain's default response to what no longer needs to be held. Sleep architecture, the specific pattern of sleep stages across a night, responds dynamically to emotional state, stress, grief, and unresolved tension all tend to suppress deep, slow-wave sleep and fragment REM sleep. Conversely, days that include even brief periods of genuine rest, gentle movement, or quiet reflection tend to produce richer, more restorative sleep at night. The brain is always tracking the conditions you provide it. Every small act of release during the day creates a slightly more welcoming landscape for deeper letting go at night. The concept of cognitive offloading, transferring mental content from the brain to an external medium, such as writing a list, speaking thoughts aloud, or simply telling someone about your day, has been studied extensively in cognitive neuroscience. Research confirms that the act of offloading reduces the brain's working memory load and measurably decreases the likelihood of intrusive, repetitive thinking. Writing down worries before bed, not to solve them, but simply to place them outside the mind, has been shown in clinical studies to improve sleep onset time. The pen, in this sense, becomes a vessel for letting go. The prefrontal cortex, so central to the neuroscience of letting go, is the last major brain region to fully mature during development, typically completing its development in the mid-20s. It is also among the first regions to show changes under conditions of sleep deprivation and chronic stress. This means that the very capacity for emotional regulation that allows letting go is the capacity most sensitive to the conditions it is given, and most responsive to the rest it receives. The tired mind holds on harder. The rested mind releases more naturally. Sleep is not merely where healing happens. It is what makes the capacity for healing available the following day. A perspective gaining traction in contemporary neuroscience is the idea of the embodied brain, the understanding that cognition, emotion, and memory are not confined to the skull, but distributed across the body through the autonomic nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. From the perspective of both somatic psychology and effective neuroscience, emotional experience is not confined to the brain alone. The way the body holds tension, regulates breath, and maintains its habitual postures reflects, in a meaningful way, the emotional history carried within it. The research here is evolving, but the observation is consistent. Genuine release tends to involve the body as much as the mind. The shoulders softening, the breath lengthening, the jaw unclenching. These are not simply effects of letting go. They are letting go itself. Research on what is sometimes called the negativity bias, the brain's well-documented tendency to weight negative experiences more heavily than positive ones, offers an important perspective on why letting go can feel effortful. The negativity bias is not a flaw. It evolved as a survival mechanism, ensuring that threats were remembered more reliably than pleasures. But in a world where most of the threats we face are psychological rather than physical, this bias can lead the brain to loop endlessly on difficulties long after any useful response is available. Sleep, and the emotional processing it enables, is one of the few naturally occurring processes that can gently recalibrate this bias over time. Among the most consistently replicated findings in sleep and emotion research is the following. Negative emotional memories fade more across a sleep interval than positive or neutral ones. This selective softening of negative valence, observed across multiple sleep studies using a variety of emotional stimuli, suggests that the sleeping brain has a gentle bias toward healing. It is not erasing the difficult. It is persistently, systematically, night after night, turning down the volume on what hurt, while preserving what was meaningful. The architecture of a dream reflects, in part, the architecture of unresolved emotional processing. Research has found that the emotional themes of a person's dreams often mirror the psychological material they are working through during waking life. Dreams about being lost, being unable to move, or being confronted by unresolvable situations are common during periods of stress and grief. Not as symptoms, but as evidence that the brain is actively engaging with what the waking mind has not yet been able to release. The dream is the brain working on your behalf, in the language it knows best. Mindfulness, the practice of sustained, non-judgmental attention to present moment experience, has been studied extensively for its effects on the brain's letting go circuitry. Long-term mindfulness practitioners show measurably different patterns of activity in the default mode network. Less rumination, less self-referential looping, and greater capacity for moving between mental states without becoming fixed in any one of them. EEG studies have also found that experienced meditators show greater theta wave activity during practice. The same brainwave signature associated with early sleep and with the most flexible, integrative forms of emotional processing. The meditative mind and the drifting, pre-sleep mind-share neurological territory. At the halfway point of our journey tonight, a quiet truth has been emerging through every fact, every pathway, every sleeping brain we have visited. The neuroscience of letting go is not the science of forgetting, nor of suppressing, nor of forcing peace. It is the science of allowing of creating the conditions in which the brain's own intelligence can do what it has always been designed to do: process, release, and heal. The instrument is already inside you. Tonight, you are simply giving it the quiet it needs to work. The memory you believe most strongly is actually reconstructed each time you recall it. Right now, your brain is gently rewriting itself, and tonight is part of that draft. Every version of you that has lain here before has also felt this heaviness, this quieting, and every one of them eventually drifted into sleep. You are part of the longest story your body has ever told. And that story, tonight, is simply resting. Now we continue the journey. The brain's response to rhythm offers a window into the neuroscience of release. Slow tempo sound, particularly at tempos between 60 and 80 beats per minute, close to the resting heart rate, activates the parasympathetic nervous system and softens the stress response. Research has found that calming sound before sleep can increase slow-wave sleep duration and reduce cortisol levels. The brain and body synchronize with rhythmic patterns in the environment. A voice that slows, a breath that deepens. These are not mere suggestions. They are invitations the nervous system is biologically prepared to accept. The science of forgetting has been transformed in recent years by an understanding of what researchers call active forgetting mechanisms, specific processes in the brain that deliberately soften or suppress unwanted memories. Studies have identified two primary mechanisms: synaptic weakening, in which the strength of connections between neurons encoding a memory is reduced, and suppression via the prefrontal cortex, in which the retrieval of a memory is gently interrupted. Both mechanisms are enhanced during sleep, where waking suppression often backfires, keeping the thought present through effort. Sleep-based forgetting works differently, quietly, without resistance, while you are not watching. The feeling of relief, that particular quality of lightness that follows genuine release, is associated with activation of the brain's reward circuitry, including the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area. These are the same regions involved in the experience of pleasure and the anticipation of positive outcomes. Letting go, when it happens naturally and completely, produces a neurochemical reward. The brain registers release not as loss, but as gain. The body feels it as something loosening, a warmth, a softening, that is, in its own quiet way, one of the most pleasant sensations available to the human nervous system. Research on slow oscillations, large, rhythmic waves of neural activity that sweep across the cortex during deep sleep, has revealed their role in emotional processing and release. These slow oscillations appear to coordinate communication between the hippocampus and the neocortex, facilitating the transfer of memories from temporary to more permanent storage. Each slow oscillation during deep sleep is neuroscience, the brain gently moving something from one place to another, deciding what belongs to today and what belongs to the longer, quieter story of your life. There is a growing area of research on what scientists call sleep-dependent emotional updating, the phenomenon by which memories about oneself are gradually revised during sleep to become more balanced and less extreme. Studies have found that people rate themselves more fairly and less harshly after a night of sleep than they do in the moment of distress. The sleeping brain, it appears, tends toward kindness. Left to its own devices, without the interruption of wakefulness, it quietly works to return you to a more accurate, more compassionate understanding of who you are. The concept of neural entrainment, the brain's tendency to synchronize its own electrical rhythms with external rhythmic stimuli, has direct relevance to the process of letting go. When the sounds surrounding you slow and soften, the brain's own oscillations are gently drawn in that direction. A voice that paces itself to the rhythm of quiet breath can invite the nervous system towards states associated with deeper release. This is not a passive process. It is a form of biological conversation between the environment and the brain. And the brain, when given the right conditions, is always ready to listen. One of the most human aspects of the neuroscience of letting go involves what researchers call the narrative self, the ongoing, autobiographical story the brain constructs about who we are across time. The brain is not a neutral recorder of experience. It is a storyteller, constantly revising the narrative to maintain coherence, meaning, and continuity. Sleep appears to play a role in this revision process, particularly the later REM-rich cycles of the night, in which disparate experiences from different periods of life are sometimes woven together in ways that produce new understanding. Some of the most important revisions to your story happen while you are not watching. The autonomic nervous system, the vast regulatory network that governs heart rate, digestion, respiration, and dozens of other bodily functions, has two primary branches: the sympathetic nervous system, which activates the body in response to challenge, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which restores equilibrium afterward. The transition from sympathetic to parasympathetic dominance, from alertness to rest, requires what physiologists call a recovery window. Sleep provides this window in its fullest form. The body you are resting in tonight is learning, slowly and continuously, that it is safe to let go. Grief, the experience of loss in all its forms, has a specific neurological signature. Studies using neuroimaging have identified distinct patterns of brain activity in bereaved individuals, including elevated activity in the posterior cingulate cortex, a region associated with self-referential memory. Grief, at the neural level, is partly a state of being drawn persistently toward the past. Sleep, and particularly the dreaming that sleep allows, appears to gently restore balance, allowing the past to remain without requiring the whole brain to live there. Healing from loss is not linear, and it is not completed in waking hours alone. The science of psychoneuroimmunology, the study of connections between psychological experience, the nervous system, and the immune system, has produced compelling evidence that emotional release has direct physiological consequences. Chronic, unexpressed, or suppressed emotion is associated with elevated inflammatory markers and reduced immune function. Conversely, the genuine processing of difficult emotional experience, including the kind of quiet release that happens during restful sleep, is associated with improvements in immune function and reduced inflammatory signaling. The body and the mind are not separate in their healing. What releases in one, releases in both. The relationship between self-compassion and neurological recovery from distress has emerged as an important area of research. Studies have found that self-compassion, the tendency to respond to one's own suffering with the same kindness one might offer a friend, activates the caregiving system of the brain rather than the threat detection system. It reduces amygdala reactivity, lowers cortisol, and increases oxytocin. Self-compassion also correlates with better sleep quality and faster emotional recovery from difficult events. Kindness toward yourself is not indulgence. It is, neurologically, one of the most effective forms of letting go available. The timing of emotional memories makes them particularly sensitive to sleep-based processing. Research has shown that memories encoded in a high emotional state benefit most from the sleep that follows shortly after, particularly if that sleep includes sufficient REM. This is why the nights following significant emotional events are among the most neurologically meaningful nights of your life. The brain needs those hours. It uses them purposefully. What feels like simply sleeping through something difficult is, in fact, one of the most active forms of release your biology provides. Light, specifically the blue wavelength light emitted by digital screens, suppresses the production of melatonin by signaling to the brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus that daylight is still present. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, a small cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus, serves as the brain's master clock, synchronizing the timing of rest and alertness across the entire body. When melatonin is delayed, the brain's transition towards sleep is delayed with it, and the emotional processing that sleep enables is postponed. Every step toward darkness in the hours before sleep is a step toward the kind of rest where letting go can genuinely occur. Among the more fascinating recent findings in sleep neuroscience is evidence that the sleeping brain engages in what researchers describe as prospective consolidation, not merely processing the past, but using the pattern-finding capacity of sleep to prepare for anticipated future events. Studies have found that people who expect to be tested on material the following day show enhanced sleep-based consolidation of that material, even without additional study. The sleeping brain plans. It organizes. It faces the future while the waking mind has stepped away. This is the kind of intelligence that does not require effort to activate. It only requires the space that sleep provides. At this point in our journey, the answer to the question this night began with has become clearer. How does the brain heal while you sleep? By doing what you cannot do while awake. Process without judgment. Release without effort. Revise without resistance. The sleeping brain has access to a quieter, more flexible, more compassionate form of intelligence than the waking brain can sustain for long. Every night, it offers you a version of yourself that is slightly less burdened, slightly more at peace, slightly closer to the understanding that everything which needed releasing has been, quietly and completely, let go. Research tracking the long-term effects of sleep quality on psychological well-being reveals a pattern that accumulates over years. Individuals who consistently achieve restorative sleep show measurably different brain structure, including better preserved gray matter in the regions most involved in emotional regulation and decision-making. This is the letting go capacity sustained across a lifetime. Every night of genuine rest is a small investment not only in tomorrow's resilience, but in the brain's long-term ability to remain open, flexible, and capable of releasing what it no longer needs to hold. The feeling of waking from deep sleep into a world that feels, for a moment, entirely new. The particular freshness of genuinely restorative rest has a neurological basis. During deep, slow-wave sleep, synaptic connections across the brain are gently scaled back through the process of synaptic homeostasis. The net effect is a reduction in neural noise, the accumulated signal interference of a day's worth of experience. The fresh morning brain is a quieter brain, too. The noise has been cleared. What remains is signal, resonance, and the particular clarity of a mind that has genuinely let go. There is a phenomenon in sleep research called the overnight therapy hypothesis, proposed by neuroscientist Matthew Walker and colleagues, suggesting that REM sleep performs an emotional form of processing during the night, revisiting difficult memories in a neurochemically safe environment, and returning them the next morning with less charge attached. This builds on what we explored earlier about REM's neurochemical silence, the locus coeruleus going quiet, norepinephrine withdrawing. The clinical evidence supporting this hypothesis has grown steadily. Disrupted REM is associated with persistent emotional distress, while intact REM correlates with recovery. The sleeping brain, in the most meaningful sense, is actively caring for you. The relationship between breath and the nervous system is one of the oldest and most direct pathways of access to the brain's releasing mechanisms. Slow, diaphragmatic breathing activates the vagus nerve, triggers parasympathetic dominance, and directly softens amygdala activity. Research has found that breathing at a rate of approximately 5 to 6 breaths per minute produces a state of physiological coherence, associated with both physical health and emotional well-being. The breath is not separate from the neuroscience of letting go. In many ways, it is the simplest and most direct expression of it. The brain regions associated with future thinking, particularly the medial prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, are also involved in worry. When we worry, we are essentially running simulations of possible futures, most of them weighted toward difficulty. Research has found that sleep disrupts this simulation loop, not by preventing the brain from thinking about the future, but by resetting its emotional baseline, so that when future thinking resumes, it does so from a place of greater equilibrium. A well-rested mind does not stop thinking about tomorrow. It simply meets it with less weight. The science of meaning-making, the brain's drive to organize experience into coherent, purposeful narrative, is intimately connected to sleep. Research on the neuroscience of narrative has found that the storytelling structures of the brain are active during dreaming, during wakeful reflection, and during the quiet transition states on either side of sleep, the hours of drifting, the soft thoughts that accompany you into rest each night, are not idle time. They are the moments when the brain is most actively working to understand what has happened, to place it in a story that can be lived with, and to find, in the space between days, whatever peace it can. The study of post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon by which some individuals experience genuine psychological development in the aftermath of significant adversity, has identified sleep as one of several factors that predict its occurrence. Individuals who report restorative sleep in the aftermath of difficult experiences are more likely, over time, to report not just recovery but growth, a deeper sense of personal strength, more meaningful relationships, and a broader perspective on what matters. Letting go, the research suggests, is not the end of a story. It is often the beginning of a different and better one. The molecule BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, supports the survival, growth, and adaptability of neurons, playing a central role in the brain's capacity to reorganize in response to experience. Research has consistently found that sleep deprivation reduces BDNF availability, while restorative sleep appears to support its presence in the brain. Whether the brain is resting, recovering, or quietly rebuilding, BDNF is part of what makes that rebuilding possible. The brain that is given sleep is a brain that retains the capacity to change, to heal, and to let go of patterns that no longer serve it. One of the quieter discoveries of sleep science concerns what happens during the brief hypnagogic state between waking and sleep. That flickering, loosely associated period of imagery and half-formed thought. EEG studies have found that this state is characterized by a mixture of alpha and theta waves, and that it shows unusual integrative properties. The hypnagogic state appears to be a unique cognitive mode, more associative and less constrained than ordinary waking thought, capable of producing connections and insights that are difficult to access in either fully alert or fully sleeping states. What arises in you, softly, at the edge of sleep, may be among the most honest and integrative thinking you do all day. And so the intellectual answer to the question this night has been asking has fully arrived. The neuroscience of letting go is the neuroscience of sleep itself. The two are not separate topics. They are the same biological event, described from different directions. Every night, whether you intend it or not, whether you struggle against it or surrender to it, your sleeping brain is engaged in the most elegant form of emotional release available to your biology. It does not require your permission. It does not require your understanding. It only requires the darkness, the quiet, and the simple, ancient willingness to close your eyes. Sleep doesn't come when you try to sleep. It comes when you stop trying. This is exactly that moment. You might be feeling tired now. That's perfectly fine. Every cell you have today will be completely replaced within 7 years. You are in the middle of a continuous renewal. Tonight is part of that process. Your body knows how to take care of itself. It has always known. Let go. We're almost there now. The sleeping body heals itself in layers. Muscles repair. Immune cells multiply. Hormones rebalance. The brain clears waste. All of this happens without effort, without intention, without your conscious mind involved at all. You have never had to tell your body how to rest. It has always known. Research has found that even a single night of deep, restorative sleep can measurably reduce the subjective intensity of chronic pain. The mechanism involves both cortisol reduction and changes in the brain's pain processing circuitry. Rest is not passive. For the body and mind that have been holding on, rest is among the most active forms of release available. The human brain, when left to its natural rhythms, moves toward coherence. Brainwaves synchronize. Regions that were competing quiet down. The internal noise of a day. All its unfinished conversations. Unresolved tensions. Unanswered questions. Gradually softens into a hum. And then, eventually, into stillness. There is a moment, just before deep sleep, when the sense of self becomes briefly indistinct. The edges of who you are, your name, your concerns, your history, loosen slightly. Neuroscientists have noted this as a decrease in activity in the default mode network. For just a moment, you are simply aware, without story. This is not loss. It is a kind of freedom the waking mind rarely allows. The heart rate slows during sleep, not because the heart is resting from effort, but because the brain has shifted its priorities. The body no longer needs to be ready for anything. It needs only to be. The heartbeat, slowing now, is a signal passing through every cell. We are safe. We can soften. We can rest. Research on temperature and sleep has found that a slight drop in core body temperature of approximately 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit is both a cause and an effect of deep sleep. The brain actively initiates this cooling as part of the sleep onset process. Warmth at the extremities, the hands and feet, signals this redistribution of heat throughout the body. The comfortable heaviness in your limbs right now is part of your biology, preparing you for the deeper letting go that sleep allows. Memory, at its deepest level, is not a record, but a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, you are rebuilding it, slightly differently, through the lens of who you are now. Sleep participates in this reconstruction. Each morning, you wake with memories that have been quietly tended overnight. You are, in the most precise sense, a different person than the one who fell asleep. The brain during deep sleep shows a pattern of activity, sometimes compared to a tide. Slow waves roll across the cortex in great, synchronized sweeps. Between waves, there is near silence, an electrical quiet unlike anything that occurs during wakefulness. In those silences, the deepest restorative and releasing processes happen. There is something in the gap between waves that the conscious mind cannot reach, and that the body needs more than almost anything else: forgiveness, the genuine psychological release of resentment or grievance, has been studied as a neurological event, and the findings are consistent. Genuine forgiveness reduces activity in the stress circuitry of the brain, reduces cortisol, and improves heart rate variability. It is not, in the research, understood as a moral act alone. It is a biological one, the nervous system releasing a tension it has been holding, sometimes for years, in the service of a story that no longer needs to be defended. The body holds emotional memory in its posture, its breath, its habitual tensions. Research in somatic psychology and in affective neuroscience has both arrived at this same observation from different directions. The shoulders that rise with anxiety, the chest that tightens with grief, the jaw that clenches with unspoken words. These are not metaphors. They are the body keeping its own quiet record. And the body, like the brain, can release that record slowly, over many nights of genuine rest. There is something in the quality of deep attention, whether to a night sky, a slow breath, or a quiet voice in the dark, that itself produces calm. Researchers studying focused, non-evaluative attention have found that it activates the same parasympathetic mechanisms as deep sleep, and in some cases can produce theta brainwave activity in awake individuals. You do not have to be asleep to begin releasing. The act of simply listening, of allowing the present moment to be enough, is already the beginning. Every night of sleep is, in a quiet way, a practice in trust. The brain cannot sleep while maintaining full vigilance. To sleep is to accept, however briefly, that the world can continue without your watching, that the problems will still exist, or will have resolved themselves in the morning, that it is safe for these hours to let go of the monitoring. The science and the experience are the same. Sleep requires surrender, and surrender, practiced nightly, becomes easier over time. The brain does not care what year it is when it heals. The mechanisms of emotional processing, memory consolidation, and cellular repair that operate tonight are the same mechanisms that have operated in sleeping humans for hundreds of thousands of years. Your biology is ancient. Its intelligence is deep. You are participating tonight in something your ancestors did in every shelter, beneath every sky, across every age of the world. There is comfort in that continuity. You are not alone in this. You never were. As sleep deepens, the threshold for external stimulation rises. Sounds that would have registered earlier in the night begin to lose their hold. The brain is making a choice, not a passive one, to prioritize its internal work over its monitoring of the external world. This is not vulnerability. It is intelligence. The sleeping brain knows what it needs, and it moves toward it with a quiet and determined grace. The neurological signature of peace, a sustained state of low amygdala activation, high vagal tone, and balanced activity between the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system, is not a rare or exceptional state. It is, in fact, the state your nervous system is designed to return to when the conditions are right. Stress and holding on are departures from the baseline. Peace, rest, and release are the baseline. Tonight is not an escape. It is a return. Research on the relationship between gratitude and the brain's default mode network has found that a brief, genuine focus on what is valued, aface, a warmth, a single moment of beauty, reliably shifts default mode activity away from self-critical and future-worried modes and toward modes associated with connection and ease. The brain that rests on something it loves releases its grip on something it fears. This is not a trick. It is the natural movement of an organism orienting toward what sustains it. The hours between midnight and 4 in the morning are, for many people, the deepest of the night, the richest in slow-wave sleep, the most active in cellular repair, and the most distant from the demands of the day. If you are still drifting in the quiet now, your body is likely doing some of its most important work. You are not missing anything. You are exactly where the science says you need to be. There is a particular quality of thought that arises in the late hours of drift. Slower, softer, less attached to outcome, more willing to follow an image or a feeling without knowing where it leads. This quality of thinking, which researchers associate with increased default mode network activity and lowered prefrontal constraint, is also the quality most associated with emotional integration and the kind of quiet self-understanding that ordinary goal-directed thought rarely achieves. The drowsy mind is not a lesser mind. In some respects, it is a wiser one. Letting go, the neuroscience ultimately suggests, is not an act of will. It is an act of allowing. It is the removal of the obstacles the brain erects between experience and release, the resistance, the judgment, the insistence that things must be other than they are. The brain that releases does not force anything. It simply stops holding. And in the stopping, something that was always there, the natural direction of the nervous system toward equilibrium and rest, can finally, gently, proceed. The deepest sleep, the sleep in which the brain's most profound healing, the most complete release, the most generous restoration occurs, does not arrive through effort. It arrives through the gradual, surrendered withdrawal of every form of trying. The body knows. The brain knows. Everything that has ever healed in you has healed this way. Not through force, but through the quiet, patient provision of the conditions in which healing was always waiting to occur. You are providing those conditions right now. That is enough. That has always been enough. One final fact, arriving softly at the edge of sleep. Research on what happens to the sense of self in the final moments before deep unconsciousness finds something the ancient contemplative traditions have long described. The boundaries soften. The distinction between self and not self becomes less sharp. There is awareness, but it is no longer of a particular person with a particular name and a particular set of concerns. There is only a quality of presence, warm, receptive, and without edges. The scientists call this the quieting of the default mode network. Some traditions simply call it rest. Tonight, whatever you call it, it is yours. And so, our quiet journey through the neuroscience of letting go comes to a gentle close. We began with the simplest truth, that the brain's natural state is not holding on, but releasing. And we arrived, through 100 facts, at the same truth made deeper. That the deepest sleep arrives not through effort, but through the gradual withdrawal of every form of trying. Along the way, we touched the amygdala, softening its alarm. We followed REM sleep as it revisited difficult memories with the alarm turned off. The locus coeruleus gone quiet. The stress chemistry withdrawn. We watched the glymphatic system clear the residue of the day, and the slow oscillation carry the heaviness of recent experience from temporary holding into something longer and gentler. And in each of these, we found the same quiet truth. The brain that heals is not the brain that fights. It is the brain that allows. The neuroscience of letting go reminds us that healing is not something we do. It is something we allow. Much of the most important work that your mind will ever perform happens in silence, in darkness, In the hours when the waking self has finally stepped aside, what the brain cannot release through force, it releases through rest. And every night that you provide it the conditions for genuine sleep, you are practicing, quietly, faithfully, without drama, the most natural form of restoration that biology has ever devised. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can, as deep as possible. Think about unity of every atom, every event, every moment in the universe. You are not separate. You are a link in the endless chain. Think about consciousness itself. Yours, mine, everyone listening. All awareness everywhere. Perhaps all connected in ways we don't yet understand. And think about tonight. Every sleeping brain, in every time zone, in every corner of the world, doing the same ancient, quiet work, releasing, healing, allowing. You are not alone in the universe of minds. Let your entire being dissolve into the ocean of consciousness, into dreamless rest, into the space before thought. Prepare for deep sleep. No boundaries left, only peace. This thoughtful exploration of the mind was made for tired minds searching for peace. A gentle like and subscribe helps other sleepless souls find their way here too. It only takes a moment, but it means the world to us. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. But there's no need to do anything now. Nothing at all. You've traveled far tonight, farther than most journeys take you. You can allow these thoughts of the healing brain to fade now, like the last image of a dream at dawn. Present, then softer, then simply part of everything, leaving only the quiet, unheld calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if all the careful, invisible work happening inside you has finally been given permission to proceed, and is simply holding you. If sleep comes, let it carry you the way the slow wave carries, not falling, not rushing, but arriving into a realm where time and weight no longer matter. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, your brain will still be there, still tending, still weaving, still becoming. The same ancient intelligence that healed you tonight will be there when you wake. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, gentle explorer. And remember, your mind is always rewriting toward the light. Good night.